2019 meeting of the Hutchinson City Council. Please call roll.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Deckent.
Here.
Dave Line.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to now introduce our new fire chief, Beer, who's going to present the prayer this morning. So, Chief, good morning and welcome.
Morning, Chief.
Morning.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the beautiful day that you've given us. And Lord, we thank you for all the men and women, both past and present, who have served in the armed forces that allowed us to do what we do day in and day out and enjoy our freedoms. Lord, now we ask you to be with the members of City Council as they make decisions that affect the city of Hutchinson. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, next item.
Item 4A, a proclamation for Emancipation Proclamation Day.
If I could ask Dallas Neal to come to the podium here, we will present the proclamation for Emancipation Day.
I like the mic.
Very good. Please come forward.
Please come forward.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Nice to see you. Fine. Good. Why don't you all introduce yourself first, and then we'll present the proclamation, if you would.
Okay, I'm Dallas Neal, and I'm the president of the Emancipation Day Committee.
And I am Carrie Meyer, and I'm the secretary.
Albert Hicks. I help out with the dance and picnic and some of the events and with the parade and stuff.
Deanna Gamble, and I help with the teen youth.
Yes, sir.
Bill Johnston. I do some of the publicity.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, we'll present this proclamation, and if some of you would like to make some comments about some of the planned activities, that would be wonderful. So let me present the proclamation. Whereas on January 1, 1863, President Lincoln proclaimed that all slavery be abolished. And whereas a constant struggle has been going on to accomplish the goals of that proclamation to bring true freedom to an oppressed people. And whereas in 1935, Aaron Johnson, along with James Woodson and Lester Harrison, were members of the Kansas Lincoln Day Club of Hutchinson that sponsored the 10th Annual Emancipation Program. And whereas in 1936 in Hutchinson, the Emancipation Proclamation Day Celebration Committee, a nonprofit organization, was organized to arrange proper and fitting activities in honor of emancipation. And now, therefore, I, John Dave Line, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby proclaim August 3rd, 2017 as Emancipation Proclamation Day in the City of Hutchinson and urge the entire community to help celebrate this important occasion. We'll present the proclamation.
Thank you very much. Well, we appreciate this, and thank you all. We want to invite you guys to come out to some of the activities that we're having. Thursday, August the 3rd at 6:45, we'll be having a free movie at Stringer Fine Arts, and it's called Loving. And then Friday, August the 4th at 8 p.m. is the free jazz concert, and we will be serving refreshments. And it's featuring Harold Dunn and the jazz magicians from Kansas City. Let's see, August the 4th, at 6 o'clock, we have a three-point shootout, and it's not only for the youth, it's also for us older ones too. So get out and show your basketball skills. And then we have our youth dance also, which Deanna is in charge of, and that's at the Boys and Girls Club at 9 to 11. Saturday, is early in the morning, is our annual 3-on-3 basketball tournament at Gray's Barbershop on South Main. Now, the Emancipation Day Parade, we've changed it this year. We normally start from 12th and Main and go to F and Main. This year, we'll start at B and Main and go to 12th and Main. So we're changing that up a little. And then our picnic this year, instead of it being at the park, it's going to be on the campus of the college at Stringer Fine Arts, their gallery theater. We're also having a car show in the parking lot. And then at nighttime is our old school jam, which the young people are starting to take over us old school people at the dance, but you have to be 21 and over to get into that, and that does cost. And then we cap it off Sunday with the Gospel Fest. It's free. It's at Stringer Fine Arts, and afterwards we have a ice cream and cake social. So everyone is welcome. It's not just for people of color. It's for everyone in the city of Hutchinson to attend, and we'd love to see some of you guys come out to some of the events. And we thank you very much for this.
Del, what time does the parade start?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Thank
10 o'clock
you.
a.m. And like I said, it's really going to be quite different this year, because for years and years it's been from 12 to F. Now it's from B to 12. So we'll see how that works.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Any
Thank
more
you.
questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. And the best to you, and we commend all of you for continuing this wonderful tradition of bringing Emancipation Day to Hutchinson community. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, we have quite an entourage in the lobby here that I'm going to ask to come forward into the council chambers to present, and I'd like to introduce Kellen McCarley and the Ulster Project, who we will present our proclamation to. So good morning, everyone. Are you Kellen?
I'm Kellen.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
I know your mother and father, so very well. So
Very
nice to see you. And how are you?
That's steer traffic. I think they come up here.
I think you all might want to come up here maybe and stand
Yeah,
in
why
front
don't
of
you
the...
come
Yeah,
on,
come on up.
file up here. That'd be wonderful. Yeah.
Up here in front, yeah. Yeah, that way everybody over there can see you.
See you on TV and everything.
Yeah.
I know just what you want.
Yeah, they seem super excited.
That way you can hide us.
That's just what I was thinking.
I'm going to spring a little surprise on all of you this morning that after the proclamation, I think probably 3 to 5 minute speech by each one of you would be in order. So about your experiences in Hutchinson. Are you comfortable with that? For a long video. There's a great answer. All right, we'll present the proclamation, and then if you kind of give us an overview of your activities since you've been here in July in Hutchinson. So let me begin by presenting the proclamation. Searching for ways to bring peace to Northern Ireland, Church of Ireland Canon Kerry Waterstone and his wife Edie initiated a strategy over 40 years ago to introduce young Irish Catholic and Protestant teens to tolerance and understanding before they became involved in the country's long-standing conflict. The plan was to bring the teens together in a neutral place where they could develop friendships without reprisal and witness peers of different faiths and political beliefs living in unity. Whereas Hutchinson was approved to become the 28th host city for the International Peace Project in the year 2000 and is hosting its 18th project this year. And whereas a dozen Hutchinson teens, half Protestant, half Catholic, with an equal division among gender, will host the 12 teens from Portadown, Northern Ireland during the month of July, and several adults will host Northern Irish adult counselors. And whereas the teens will work alongside each other in multiple public service projects for the community of Hutchinson. And whereas the Ulster Project will work to strengthen the ecumenical ties of cooperation among the churches of the host community. Whereas members of the Hutchinson community have united in the effort to help usher peace into Northern Ireland by providing cash and product donations, meals, volunteer transportation and labor, planning or recognition, and opening their homes to these guests, both teens and counselors. And whereas the Ulster Project will strive to transform young Christians into leaders and peacemakers. Now therefore, I, John Daveline, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of July as Ulster Project of Hutchinson Month. So with that, we welcome all of you here this morning, and if you'd like to share some of your thoughts, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, my name is Kellen McCarley, and I am one of the American counselors of the Ulster Project. And soon I will introduce Jack Gibson, one of our Northern Irish counselors. But just to give you a rundown of some of the things we've already done this month, we've done a lot of community service. We spent a day at Tech with the Tech clients. We got to have a water fight with them, and then we concluded the day with a Tech dance, which is still one of the favorites of a lot of our teens here. We have done some touring. We went to Stratica, we've been to the Cosmosphere. So a lot of our Hutchinson teens, because half of them are from here, have done all those things, but half have not. So it's fun to get to show the Northern Irish teens around those places too. Another important thing that we do is Time of Discovery, which is a time to come together as a group and talk about our differences, but also our similarities, and we get to learn and grow in that time as a group as well. So without further ado, I'll pass on the mic to Jack Gibson, and he's going to share some words of thanks to the City of Hutchinson.
Thanks, Callan. As Callan says, my name is Jack Gibson. I'm one of the Northern Irish councillors for the Ulster Project this year. I just want to say a big thank you to the City of Hutchinson for opening your hearts and your homes to us throughout this month. It wouldn't be possible to have such a great project if it wasn't for the support of the community. By allowing us this mutual space to come here to reflect on our conflicts at home, our divides, and throughout the month become one, it really wouldn't be possible without each and every person here. So throughout the month, as Callan says, we take part in these activities. The activities will make memories, they'll make bonds, and they'll make friendships that will last forever. The teens won't forget it, and when they go home, they'll be able to be these leadership models within their local community. But for the project to start here in 2000, and to come back each year, we are truly amazed by the generosity of the people of Hutchinson. So just to close, I would like to say thank you to the churches, the businesses, the schools, and the families here in Hutchinson for allowing us to be here this month and for your continued support. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. You bet you're right. Great to see all of you, and safe travels to your countryland. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you. How's it going? Good.
All right, next item, please.
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
This is the time that we invite anybody in the audience that would like to come forward and present any thoughts on items related to the Hutchinson community that are not on the agenda. So is there anyone in the audience? Yes. Mira?
Good morning, Council. I'm Meryl Dye, the Assistant City Manager, and I just wanted to remind folks that the Hutchinson Human Relations Commission will host the Community Conversation Series. And the first conversation is on race, and that's tonight, 7 o'clock to about 8 o'clock at the Hutchinson Public Library Auditorium, which is upstairs. We hope to draw participants from the community to generate a range of viewpoints on how our society and on how our community, more particularly, might address and make progress on race relations. Now, these series are going to be held on the third Tuesday of the first month of each quarter. Our first conversation is on race. We're not certain what the next conversation will be. It might still be on race, but the Human Relations Commission meets tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and that's an opportunity to take the feedback that we get from the conversation tonight and decide how we're going to move forward and topics for the future. So again, 7 o'clock to about 8 o'clock tonight at the Hutchinson Public Library.
Thank you, Meryl.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? All right, seeing none, next item, please.
Item 6, consent agenda.
Do we have a motion?
I would,
will move.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
By all means.
Go ahead.
I would, we're so,
No,
ample.
you.
Yeah. Move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Oh, and I will second that.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes. Next item.
Item 7A, consider ordinance adopting the 2017 Uniform Public Offense Code.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. You have an ordinance before you to adopt the Uniform Public Offense Code. It's the yearly pamphlet where we update those. Not a great many changes if you want to hear them, and I do have them. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'd ask that you approve the ordinance.
All right. Mr. Brown, any questions from council?
there any changes that largely affect us or no?
No, most of them, they added some definitions, added some coverage to domestic battery for dating relationships, changed some fines on buying sexual relations, and added required permits for amusement rides. That's primarily it.
Okay. How much are the permits?
It doesn't provide for the amount it requires. It's the offense. In there is the offense. If you operate an amusement ride without a permit, that's the offense.
I see,
The
okay.
permits are actually a civil matter and being taken care of, I think, by the Department of Labor.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? All right, so we have a motion.
Let's hope that none of those do affect us. I think that's how you worded it.
Yeah.
I would again move to approve the ordinance incorporating the 2017 Uniform Public Offense Code by reference and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Yes.
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 Second?
Yes.
Dateline.
Yes. Next item.
Item 7B, consider ordinance adopting the 2017 standard traffic offense ordinance.
And then here's the rest of them for the standard traffic ordinances. There's only two changes. One is about when you're riding a bike, what you have to have to your rear. And the second one is increasing the fine on seat belts from $10 to $30. And we don't get those proceeds. That goes to the state.
Oddly enough, my car insurance rep over here thought that might affect me.
I thought this might be something, traffic offenses might be something that would affect Councilman.
Actually, it affects
should
the
be
bicycle
confidential.
riding
This really
person in
Yeah.
the changes, not one driving a vehicle.
Correct, I saw that, yeah, and I have the proper lighting, so I should be good to go. Appreciate it.
Have you been inspected? Do we need to inspect you?
I've not. I think I'll pass muster, though.
I'd move to approve an ordinance incorporating the 2017 standard traffic offense ordinance by reference and authorize the mayor to sign.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Let's call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dateline.
Yes. Next item.
Item 7C, consider ordinance pledging future use of the quarter-cent retailer sales tax revenue.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. I just point out two things. Well, three things. Number one, this was tabled to this week's meeting. Keep in mind, council, that this is pledging of proceeds. It is not a new tax. There's been some chatter out there that this is a new tax. It is not a new tax. It is a continuation of an existing tax. And also keep in mind that the existing tax does not expire until March 31 of 2019. So when I said at last May we're ahead of the game, we are ahead of the game. And so the current tax does not expire till March 31, 2019. Whatever pledging of proceeds you approve will not apply until April 1, 2019. So it will not impact the 2018 budget, and it won't impact the first quarter of 2019. It will have an impact from April 1, 2019 to March 31, 2024. And with that, I'll stop right there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Just for, again, a little additional background, I think you'll recall the council approved back on June 20th the initial ordinance that really sets into motion the question of extending the current dedicated quarter-cent sales tax for the 5 years effective. And so that was approved and put into place on June 20th. Today's ordinance, the proposed ordinance, really sets out the percentage allocation, which I think you're all familiar with. Let me review those proposed allocations. They're the same that have been previously in our sales tax issue, the quarter-cent sales tax. Of the proceeds, 47% is earmarked for street and sidewalk improvements, 15% for property tax reduction, 33% to the Kansas Cosmosphere, and 5% to Stratica. And that's really the item that we are dealing with today in this proposed ordinance on the agenda. Then on July 5th, the council, we essentially, as Mr. Brown reported, we tabled that for further discussion, in that there was some discussion about potentially reducing those allocations. And again, let me revisit those proposals that were presented here on July 5th. to reduce the Cosmosphere allocation from 33% to 30%, to reduce the allocation for the Stratica from 5% to 4%. So the 4% would then be earmarked for property tax reduction. And so that was the item of discussion back on July 5th. So, Council, I want to have a good discussion on this, but I want to start things by actually putting on the table a motion that I want to present for discussion purposes. And so I would move to approve an ordinance pledging the future use of the revenue which may be received by the City of Hutchinson from the 1/4 of 1% retailer sales tax levied in the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign. So that's the motion I would like to present to the council.
And I will second the motion as presented.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and so parliamentary procedure will certainly then allow for discussion. Again, I want to start that discussion by making a few comments so you have a clear understanding of my feelings on this particular motion. I support the retention of the current allocation as is proposed in the ordinance. I think any cuts to that allocation would have a negative impact on certainly both the Cosmosphere as well as Stratica. I think we all recognize that we have two first-class attractions that are the envy of thousands and thousands of communities across the country with these two world-class facilities. I think it also additionally sends the wrong message that if we begin to reduce these allocations, that I think it sends a mixed message to the public in terms of the commitment of the City of Hutchinson. I thought back a little bit about kind of the history of both the Cosmosphere and Stratica, and a couple things come to my mind. I know Patty Carey, who was the founder of the Hutchinson Planetarium and the Cosmosphere, would be very proud of the Cosmosphere today. She was such an instrumental person back in the 1960s and 1970s when she started that small planetarium on the Kansas State Fairgrounds, what I'm told, in a little chicken barn there. That was the beginning of what we have today. And her dream continued to grow and grow to this incredible science and education and space exploration museum. And as I've simply said, we cannot take the Cosmosphere for granted, as we cannot take other attractions for granted in the community. I think you all appreciate that we have a gem here in the Cosmosphere, and it needs to continue to be supported at the current level. And certainly, additionally to the Stratica, which is now celebrated this year its 10th anniversary. I was going back through some records a few days ago and looked back into the 1950s and 1960s when the community leaders then discussed the idea of promoting the idea of a one-of-a-kind underground salt museum. They used to have tours of the schools, but regulations prohibited that. And so thus began that discussion back in the early 2000s with community leaders. I think we know that Stratica is the only one of its kind in North America. And I've always said that we need to continue to build upon our strengths. And certainly Stratica is one of our strengths with the staple salt industry of Hutchinson. And it's part of the Hutchinson fabric. And so the combination of these two attractions, I think, deserve the continued support of the community and the voters. The voters historically have been very supportive of this quarter-cent sales tax. Again, to review what we had previously discussed, in 1993 there was a 54% approval, in 97 a 60% approval, and that continued to receive support in both 2008 with 72% approval, and in 2012 with 71% approval. So I think we've got the mix proper in the minds of the voting public, that they're comfortable with what is presented to them. And so for these reasons, I support the continuation of the current allocation. So with that, Council, I would invite any of you to make comments about the current ordinance or what was proposed 2 weeks ago. So.
I might just say that I am also in support of retaining the current allocation, but I will be abstaining from this vote as I serve on the governing board of the Cosmosphere.
When was the, and I don't know if you know, Mayor, or possibly John, when was the change from a 50-50, which was the initial ordinance, if I recall? 50% city.
That was in 97.
97.
So the second.
Right.
And
Then-
that time it went to a 35.
50, 35, 15.
Yeah, 50, 35, 15. And then when was the second change then to include some funding for Stratica?
208.
2008, the very next, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? or
Well,
discussion items?
some comments.
Sure.
Certainly not nearly as well prepared and polished as your comments, Mr. Mayor, but I can't disagree with anything you say. The comment that Councilmember Inskeep made and I picked up and continued discussion on 2 weeks ago just leads me to thinking about our budget, and I feel we have an obligation to make it a point to consider all kinds of options. And I think to not consider would be the error and the failure on our part. Now, does that mean that we proceed and adopt every option that comes to mind or we think about? No. But I do believe that, and I try to be a person who thinks outside the box a little bit and proposes things that may not be the most popular. I certainly support the Cosmosphere and Stratica, and it's good that the quarter-cent sales tax has been progressively supported more strongly over the 4 votes thus far that have occurred. I'm convinced that a year from now, when we were talking about the 2019 budget, which is the time, as you pointed out, the vote, assuming it's approved, would take effect for whatever distribution is included. That we will be dealing much like we are this year, and I've made these similar comments last meeting, and that we're going to be looking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and maybe even well past $1 million, to reduce at least initial proposals, and probably even be cutting in deeper than some of the easy things. If we were to consider, and I realize the motion that's on the table right now, but if we were to consider what we discussed 2 weeks ago, that would result in about 80,000, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. In the overall scheme of things, it's not a huge amount, but we've looked at a lot of 20s, 50s, $1,000 bits and pieces, and we'll be doing that again today as we look at the newest suggestions and recommendations by the city manager. The other comment I want to make, and I wish I could think of a better term, but I think we need to be careful that entities, attractions, good attractions, strong attractions, like the Cosmosphere or Stratica or other amenities that we have here in Hutchinson, aren't put on such a high pedestal that they can't be touched in terms of funding. I think that would be another failure on our part to not at least consider that. City streets, I'll use an example. We are touching city streets, and I know there was a strong commitment made not many years ago to boost, but we recognized we can't sustain that level, at least right now. And so I want to make that comment as well, that I hope we don't place venues and amenities that we have so high up on the pedestal that we can't seriously think about having to have some impact that we may not want to make, but really we have a responsibility to consider and maybe to make. So I think that's well enough.
And I would agree with Steve in that respect. Again, also a huge supporter of both attractions. I'd mentioned in a conversation yesterday, actually, my middle daughter is attending Cosmosphere Camp. She's packing as we speak. So I'm contributing in my own way in that regards. But yes, and that's what brought it to light. And I didn't even have a proposal at the time, but just a suggestion of conversation about here's another source of revenue. Again, when we're struggling to make budget, we need to take a hard look at everything, I thought. And it's not rocket science. It's increased revenues or decreased expenses. We were wringing, John's been working his tail off to...
Was that a pun? Did you intend that? It's not rocket.
Which part? Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, I missed it myself. Some of my best stuff is incidental. Anyways, you know, trying to get the expenses down and so on and so forth. Here I saw an opportunity, albeit not a huge line item, but another opportunity for some additional revenue that could help offset, albeit I am fully aware that it will not impact this budget. But I'm also not short-sighted enough to know that, like Steve had said, this is not a short-term problem. This is going to be an ongoing issue that we're going to be facing. I wasn't championing that we do this necessarily, but I just thought due diligence suggested that we have the discussion.
And I appreciate that we don't always defer to the status quo and not, I mean, due diligence would dictate that we look at everything. But I would caution that when we get to times like this in our communities, that we don't, out of desperation, lose sight of what community is. And is it just streets and safety? No, it's not. And, you know, we struggle so much to bring in jobs and to bring in new people and to slowly whittle away at the few things that make us unique and really attractive. I don't think would be in our best interest long term. But I do absolutely appreciate where both of you are coming from, and I think it's our responsibility to look under every nook and cranny. But I also think it's our responsibility to really have a larger conversation about where 2/3 of our general fund goes and whether our staffing levels are sustainable long term. And I think none of us wants to go there. None of us wants to go there. So every year we have long drawn out conversations about $15,000 expenditures here, 50 there, when really we need to be maybe doing something even tougher. I mean, this is tough, this conversation. But I would just caution us not to cut everything fringe about this community, because then we're just left with bones, and it's not Hutchinson. You know, we were built on some of these unique attractions and great parks, things that aren't necessarily basic services, but that definitely make our community what it is today.
Well, that ties into the whole quality of life issues, which I think we all agree are essential to attractions. My personal feeling on this is that we're too late in the game to cut the percentages to these entities. If we'd had this discussion a year ago, I might feel differently. But to put forth, even though granted this does not expire until 2019, I don't think it's appropriate to make a change at this point in time. I do think it probably is going to be, should the should the tax pass in November, I think it will be incumbent upon the council to sit down and look at a long-term plan to gather data from these two entities as to the impact that they have on the community, what benefits they are providing the community, and perhaps at that point in time begin the discussion of looking at possible changes in the allocations. But I don't feel that it's appropriate right now.
I want to agree with, and couldn't agree more with Jade's comment in regards to looking at where 2/3 of our budget, operating budget, our general fund budget goes. I want to disagree pretty strongly, though, Nancy, with your comments. Most of us are likely not to be here, or may not be.
Yeah, we're going to be here for part of it.
When another tax, percent to sale tax vote, and then the ordinances we need to pass come about. And I think I won't defer to that. That doesn't indicate how I'm going to vote, but I won't defer to that because I see that as kicking the can down the road to the next council. A year and a half, a year and a half ought to be enough time in anybody's budgeting deliberations and work, ours included, to make some decisions and adjust and make the adjustments. We're doing it.
I say we've
4
tasked
months.
John with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not a
With
year and a half.
less
We're talking
time.
about 4 months from now, 5 months from now, that what we've been doing over the last couple of months or so is going to be imposed and impacting. And I'm sure he's probably beginning to make adjustments already, but the point being, the 2018 budget starts in 5 months. March of 2019 is over a year and a half away, so I think there's plenty of time to react.
We agree to disagree.
Well,
Yes.
it appears that there
Right.
are several people in the audience who might have an opinion on this.
Yeah, I'd like to make sure that council have any other comments before we invite any of those in the audience to make some comments related to the ordinance specifically. Any other comments from council? All right, if not, I would invite anybody in the audience that would like to make some comments regarding the proposed ordinance to please come forward and introduce yourself. Would ask that you try not to repeat other person's thoughts. So if you would be so kind to do that, that would be great.
My name is Dick Hollowell. I'm the CEO of the Cosmosphere. I appreciate the opportunity to tell you what we think is extremely important to the community. Obviously, I would like to just very quickly reiterate what I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and that is that we feel the economic impact we bring to the city is crucial. Actually, when you consider payroll, payables, and the visitation that we have outside of the area, we think we account for approximately $13 million. I think that's a conservative figure, but one that without question is important. I would also like to state that without question, the Cosmosphere and Stratica are two of the most unique visitation areas or places that you could possibly get, not only here in Hutchinson, but in the world. We have a world-class museum that unquestionably is one that you cannot find anywhere else, and Stratica the same way. So I think it's important to remember that. Obviously, any decrease has an immediate impact, and when I say immediate, when we look forward to the 18 and 19 budget on people and on programming that we would provide. So I would appreciate it that you take that in consideration. I think it's extremely important to us, and obviously I think it's likewise important to the city.
Thank you.
Well said, Dick. My name is Joe Onches, and I'm here on behalf of the Cosmosphere Governing Board of Directors, for which I serve as vice chair. Our chair, Eric Steinley, and several other board members are here as well, along with some Cosmosphere staff. And I just want to share a few comments from a board member's perspective, if I may, so thank you for indulging me. This is a really exciting time to be associated with the Cosmosphere, and I say so because there is a real entrepreneurial spirit, and that has manifested itself in some unique ways that really speak to the future of the Cosmosphere as an engine for economic development in Hutchinson, and I'd like to just highlight a couple of those that are in the works. You may know that we have been in conversations with a commercial developer in the Kansas City area to initiate a satellite location for the Cosmosphere, and the key takeaway for that is that that attraction would help drive not only revenues from that venue itself back to Hutchinson, a portion of them, but also all kinds of other opportunities for the Cosmosphere to extend its brand and its influence outside of Hutchinson, which is ultimately good for the city. So it could be major gifts and donations from benefactors in the Kansas City area. It could be other things such as the licensing of curricula, which we can use technology to move into classrooms outside of our operating area in other states and create revenue opportunities from elsewhere in the U.S. and around the world. It means that we can continue to do innovative things with SpaceWorks, not only in the restoration of spacecraft, but working with major motion pictures as we continue to do even now. And this entrepreneurial spirit that I think is blossoming right now is something that contributes to the Hutchinson economy, or has the potential to contribute in ways beyond the $13 million impact that we're registering right now. It's not just hotel rooms and restaurants and visitors that come with family members for Space Camp. And incidentally, that number has grown to about 1,000 campers this summer. So we've seen incredible growth in some of those educational programs. But to be equipped to do even more out of the state via technology, or in Kansas City in new markets, is ultimately a potential for Hutchinson to have even more economic benefit as a result of the Cosmosphere expanding its influence. So I'm very gratified as a board member to see some of those things going on now and to play a role in some of those conversations, and terribly excited about where we're going to be in the next few years. And I think, as Council Member Soldner expressed, the idea of quantifying some of that for you and giving you some empirical data that helps to show what we're doing to grow the economy in Hutchinson is a task we would welcome, and something that I think would show very strong results. So I know there are tough decisions to be made now, and respect the work that each of you is doing as council members to do what's right for the city. And I want to thank you for your commitment to considering these carefully, but would also just ask that you think strategically about the timing of this, as the Cosmosphere is on the verge of some very exciting things, and the support that we receive through the 0.25% sales tax is certainly a part of what sustains our ability to deliver services and maintain staffing at the level that we have now and at the level we aspire to be in the coming years. So thank you for the opportunity to share some of these comments, and for your strategic consideration of where to cut. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
All right, questions from council?
I had a few, and some of them may have been touched upon, but I back to the genesis and the history of the tax in '93. What was the genesis of it? Was it do I remember correctly? Was it capital improvements, or what was it? Okay?
Yes.
And obviously those capital improvements were met or created or whatever at that time, and so on and so forth. Okay. I guess then a question then becomes the same thing. We're talking about revenue and expenses and all that stuff, and not to get into personal financials by any stretch, but has the Cosmosphere been able to see increased revenues as we've gone along? Are we sustaining? Are we operating in the right side of the ledger, and so on and so forth?
I think when you look at past and even today, as a nonprofit, obviously, as most, we struggle with revenue. We generate, quite honestly, about 82 to 85% of our total revenue is generated internally. Obviously, that's extremely important to us, and we strive every day to try to increase that percentage. But at the end of the day, the amount received from the sales tax is critical to the operation in total.
I might add that while the Cosmosphere is more than a museum, if you compare it to other museums, the percentage of revenue that comes from a subsidy or from local support is significantly lower than what you'd see in our peer institutions in other cities. So we're working hard to be more self-sustaining, and at the same time give back to the community, as we do through free admission for Reno County and Space Out Saturdays, which provide STEM opportunities for young children, and lots of other benefits that we try to afford in appreciation and recognition of the support that we receive from the city.
Thank you for that. I think I had heard mentioned also in the previous conversation 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, that there was a conversation about possibly asking for an increase in the allocation. Am I mistaken in that, or no?
We would love an increase.
Well, of course. Were there specific plans?
I personally did not.
Did not? Oh, okay. Maybe I misunderstood that. I thought I'd heard that in the
Well, there was a subgroup that John Beardoff and myself
Maybe that's
and
what we're referring to.
Dick and Mary Grace were part of, and Merrill Dye, when we began earlier this spring discussing planning for the anticipated November election. And right out of the chute, both Mr. Beardoff and myself and Merrill Dye essentially communicated this was not a formal city policy or council decision, but that the current allocation to the city, 47% streets and 15% for property tax reduction, that there was no interest in us reducing those allocations. So I turned to both Mary Grace and Mr. Hollowell and suggested to them that perhaps they would like to convene themselves and have a discussion about that and see if there was any agreement or disagreement in terms of any change within their allocation. And so that's Dave,
it wasn't a formal
conversation.
request.
It was
per
not a
se, or
formal
anything like
request.
that.
No.
Okay. I may have misunderstood that.
So that's what transpired with that subgroup. Hi, Mary
My name is-
Grace.
Hi,
Yes.
Mary Grace Clements. I'm
Please
Executive Director
go
of
ahead
the
and
City of
introduce yourself.
Stratica. Yes, and in that meeting that we did address, that's where that did come from, because as I was being educated as to the history of this quarter-cent sales tax, the 2007-2008, where Stratica received 5%, it was conveyed to me that was for sustainability, because Stratica was a new entity and it was struggling to maintain and to stay afloat. So that 5% was for sustainability, and in that meeting is where I did discuss the fact that, well, that's just long-term death.
Oh.
So we need to consider how we can do and have fantastic programs such as the Cosmosphere for STEM and things like that. And so that's where probably you've heard some of
Maybe
that
that's
generated from at that time.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Dave, you have any other questions?
I think those are the ones, for the most part, with regards to that. No, thank you for your time. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
fine. Thank you, folks.
I do,
Yes, Mary Grace.
I do have a few other comments and statements to the fact that, you know, Stratica has been in business for 10 years now. And I say it's been in business because it is a service organization, a nonprofit, but if it's not run as a business, it is by its own design not going to survive, because you can't rely on quarter-cent sales tax for sustainability. At the end of the day, we generate, this past 5 months, we've had 825 scouts sleeping underground 650 feet from responsible from 8 different states. Next month, we're going to be featured in the Boys Life, which is the Boy Scouts magazine. We expect to open up that dialogue to generate more people. We've worked very hard to raise our visibility within the country through various events. We strive, our 5K, I mentioned to you, we represented 12 different states. We have in the past year, not even a year, in the past 6 months, we have been featured in Runner's World magazine. We have been featured in Red Book magazine. We have been featured on Delta Airlines in their in-flight magazine. We have been featured in Southwest Airlines in their in-flight magazine. As I told you, we're going to be in Boys Life magazine. And in the fall, we're going to be featured in the Chicago Tribune. So we're working very hard to raise and elevate not only the Stratica, but also for Hutchinson. We are working at negotiating deals with our partnering communities to elevate this community into the forefront of the minds of all different folks within a driving distance. We're partnering with the Cosmosphere and with the CVB on how we market together, not just working in silos, but how we work together. So this, what you're considering doing, even a reduction of 1%, is more money than I have budgeted to even make for Stratica. So it is a definite effect where it will cripple us and it will drive me to have to lay people off. And I hate to say that, but that's the effect of it instantly, because we have to look at how we're going to be able to make 2018, 2019, and the future. With more funding, we could help develop STEM programs. We could help build an education program. But you know, we work very hard to write grants. We write a grant that gives the local students the ability to come for free. We're looking at ways, we give a $5 reduction to every resident in Reno County. So we look at ways we can be creative. So with that, I ask that we cannot afford to lose a single penny for this revenue stream. So any questions that you have?
Questions from council?
No?
One, I guess, and it might be for both parties again. I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think we all are, that the tax is going to go to the electorate and the electorate's going to pass the tax. Is there a contingency plan in place for both entities should this tax not pass? I hate to think that we're operating so close to the edge.
Good question.
If I'm not misguided, and
We're always looking at revenue stream.
oh, of course.
Always looking at how we can have sustainability. But do I have a plan for right now today? No, it's always in work and being developed.
I'm
Yes.
run a business. I know
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's, you shift, you move, you go left, you go right as it goes.
I think the other impact is I think you should also mention the school children. I can't even imagine the numbers the Cosmosphere represents, but just in the past 6 months, we've had over almost 6,500 school children visit Stratica. And that's just an amazing feat. And so, and we work where they'll come and visit us and they'll go over to visit the Cosmosphere. And we're working very hard to partner with the Cosmosphere. How do we work a long weekend? Come in, work with our local hotels and our restaurants to put packages together. We're working on that currently today to help elevate the community. So.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Good morning,
Good
Mayor
morning.
Dave Lyon and council members. I'm Deborah Tufel, the president and CEO of the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce, and I wanted to deliver a message on behalf of our board of directors this morning, one in support of the quarter-cent sales tax. And we have had great discussion as a board as well as our public policy committee around this topic during the last 2 weeks. And for a lot of reasons. As you know, we manage the economic development programs on behalf of this community, as well as the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Market Hutch funding. And the tourist attractions like Cosmosphere and Stratica, as well as other unique amenities that we have in the community, like the sports arena and Fun Valley and the state fairgrounds, and all of those things that round out making Hutchinson differentiated from any other community in Kansas and in the world, really, are the things that we market every day. So we bring thousands of visitors to this community because of quality attractions like these two that we're talking about this morning. I think the economic impact numbers that we have most recently show that tourism has a $117 million economic impact on Hutchinson and Reno County, and it supports over 1,200 jobs with the multiplier effect of the attractions and the direct jobs that they employ, and then these spill over into the hospitality and restaurant industry in this community. So it's undoubtedly a major economic driver. For those reasons, a week ago, the Public Policy Committee took up this topic, and they made a recommendation to our board to, one, be supportive of the quarter-cent sales tax, and two, to oppose any reduction to these two key attractions in our community. So that was the message I wanted to deliver, and I don't need to belabor the point because we've had other folks that have talked eloquently about how unique these attractions are for Hutchinson, and it's really what makes up the unique fabric of this community. So we thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from council? Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Lucas Bishop. I own several businesses within the state of Kansas, in different cities.
Lucas
Bishop.
Okay.
BISH.
All right, sir.
And I guess I have some concerns about the economic condition of this town in general. If you don't notice, there's stores closing, there's manufacturers leaving, jobs are leaving, but we're worried about spending money on attractions and we have no economy to support it in the first place. I mean, this town has terrible issues with sales tax. It inhibits sales. There's people that don't come into town because of the sales tax rate. They go to Wichita. I personally just bought a wrestling mat off of eBay, and I had it shipped to a Walmart in Wichita because it saved me $30. You know, it was worth the drive to me. And so I guess my concern is, you know, I think the police are underfunded here. I think they need allocated money because we have a terrible crime issue here too. Theft is through the roof, assaults, batteries, all kinds of stuff. They, in my opinion, are the heroes of the city, and they don't get paid well. They don't get paid well. They don't have proper funding. The fire department has more funding by far than the police. I mean, I just don't know what the situation is here in this town where we've got to worry about these kind of attractions bringing people in when there's no economic base here to begin with. There's no manufacturing, there's nothing.
With regards to the sales tax piece, and again, we're talking about the allocation.
Sure.
But you're absolutely right, and you have the opportunity in November, if you feel that it's not warranted, to vote. I don't know if it's going to be yay or nay, depending on the wording of the deal, to see to it that tax doesn't continue. That doesn't affect the conversation
Sure.
piece that we're having today, which is that. We're also having discussions, contractual discussions, which you'll hear about some of it, and with those entities that you mentioned as well. So we value
and I
absolutely what
appreciate
they
that. And then the other thing
bring
is
to
I
the
noticed
table.
there's a website called the Kansas Open Records Act, and you can go there and pull payroll records from any city for the most part, and Hutchinson doesn't participate in that. I think that's something that the city needs to look at to educate the masses on what we're spending here. Because no one here understands how much is being paid out. And I have no disrespect for any government employee of any kind. I understand they're in the position they're in. But the thing is economically, it is what it is. We got a town of 40,000 people. How many of those are taxpayers? How many of those are private sector taxpayers? And I mean, this is something that I'm just amazed. So I just want to let you guys keep that in mind. And like I said, maybe we should use things like, instead of trying to attract people to the Cosmosphere and Stratica, support our police. I mean, I know that they don't have the manpower to cover it. They have, I think, 4 or 5 cops on it at any given time. I mean, that's sad. So I appreciate your time.
For your comments.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Bishop. All right. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Nan Hover, and I'm currently retired. I was a business person. I do have real estate downtown. But I have contacted each one of you regarding the allocation of the 1/4% sales tax. I understand you think it might be too late, but I want to bring forth the idea that I appreciate the Cosmosphere. I appreciate Stratica. I'm a past board member, but I think that the City Council should consider the difference between the 5% and the 30% or 33 and 6, whatever you end up deciding, because I think for many years the Cosmosphere has had a good amount of money. When you look at July, when you look at 58,000 per month versus 8,800 per month, I'm not sure how Stratica can continue to grow in the manner that the Cosmosphere has grown. I feel like the Cosmosphere has had that extra percentage since 1993. Stratica is 10 years old. I think they're both very valuable to the community, but I don't think, and I think Steve made that comment, we can't place a higher value on one entity than the other. We also have the Kansas State Fair here that could be in jeopardy at some point. So I think we need to look at each one of these entities. I think it's great that the Cosmosphere is going to have a satellite in Kansas City. However, that concerns me because why would they come to Hutchinson if they can go to Kansas City? I'll be real honest with you. I think you're going to have a tough go on the 1/4% sales tax. I really do. I think you all need to look at social media and see what's being said. Just like the gentleman that was here, there's going to be a lot of work that's going to need to be done for you to be able to pass this 1/4%. But I do think, in fairness, I think you should look at the allocation of how you're spending that money. And that's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I might just point out that the city has not passed any of these sales tax increases. These referendums have gone to the voters, and the voters have passed these with overwhelming majorities. So I do read a lot of those comments, Nan, and I am concerned because I do think our sales tax is too high. Absolutely. But people continue to vote in favor for it. So I would encourage people, if they feel strongly about it, or even if they don't, because it's their civic responsibility, to get out and vote in November.
All right. Any other folks in the audience that would like to make some comments? If not, I would ask for a roll call on the motion.
Okay, Pyros de Carvalho.
Abstain.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
No.
Deckent.
No.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Okay, Paul, we have a tie.
All right,
What do we do?
We have a 2-2 vote, so we do not have a majority for the motion.
That's correct.
So essentially, will not
Procedurally, now we have we have an ordinance that we have approved placing this on the ballot in November, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Without this recent ordinance being approved, what is the next logical step?
Well, I don't know if there's a logical step, but you have not committed the funds. You're saying that we have a vote, it is for these purposes, but this ordinance is for pledging specifics about where it will be spent. And you're telling the public before the vote, they are committed. These funds are committed. They will be spent for these purposes and these amounts. And without pledging the funds, you don't have anything.
All right.
We got to figure it out, is essentially what you're saying.
All right, is there any further discussion, or does any councilperson want to offer another amendment or another motion?
Question, Paul. What's the drop dead date on setting the allocations?
There's not a drop dead date because the ordinance putting it on the ballot is already there.
Okay.
It's already been delivered to the Reno County Clerk. It's set for the ballot unless the council passes another ordinance repealing it. So there's not a date, but if you're going to pledge the funds, you want that done in advance so when the voters come, they know specifically where those funds will go. And if there is any campaigning for or against this quarter-cent sales tax, those same folks will need to know the answer.
Okay.
So we can tell the public, even if it's just a matter of information and they're calling City Hall, we need that same information.
So, fairly soon. It's not a drop dead date, but
no,
we need to.
We're ahead of the drop dead dates to put that on the ballot.
We hit the drop dead for the vote. For the quarter-cent
Well,
sales.
I might just say that there are an awful lot of people who've come out in both support and opposition today, and I would hate for us to continue to table this conversation as it might not be fair to them. I mean, is Mr. Bishop going to want to come out again? Is Mrs. Tufel going to want to come out again? Is, you know, Mrs. Hover and Mr. Anches? I'm not sure that it's fair to the citizens who've taken time out of their workday to show up today.
Well, it seems to me this action here just creates further doubt in the minds of the public. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I too am not one to table this item. So we should move on to the next item on the agenda.
Item 7D.
I'm sorry, may I?
Sure.
You asked for an alternate motion, and I guess I could make one, but would it be appropriate for us to have, for the four of us that are voting at least, or all of us, to have some discussion on if there's a middle ground? I can make a motion that would be the comments that were made 2 weeks ago. I guess we can find out for sure whether or not that passes or fails to pass for due to a split vote. But where I'm going is there some middle ground or compromise or whatever that we could be talking about?
I would be open to it.
What would you have in mind?
It's a great question. In hearing everybody's comments, I think when Steve proposed that we looked at 30 and 4, I'm assuming he tagged both entities because, for lack of a better term, fairness. Everybody participate. Everybody has to tighten the belt a little bit. But in listening to Mary Grace and what she had to say about that minimal amount, I would be open to looking at leaving them either at their current funding level, and then maybe a lesser amount on the Cosmosphere reduction. Still going to the property tax piece. I didn't do the math per se, but I don't know about where you're at, Steve, where your head is.
I'm open.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the math of the 4%, I did some quick calculations on a $100,000 house in terms of what the shift in terms of potential reduction in property tax to a $100,000 house would be about $5 a year.
To make sure I'm understanding correctly, if we shifted that 1% from anywhere to the...
No, this would be the current 4% as we...
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, that's the 4%. So the impact in terms of the shift of the property tax savings on a $100,000 house would be $5 a year.
And the 4% you're referring to in linkage to Stratica, or am I?
I'm thinking just the previous.
Oh, the
initial
4%,
proposal,
the difference.
right.
I'm sorry.
We're
Yeah,
reducing
gotcha.
Not Stratica,
overall
no,
Gotcha.
just the 4% total.
Yeah.
3 for the cause and 1 for Stratica.
I was missing that as well.
So that gives you an idea of the minimal impact on a $100,000 house.
Well, we could always look at reducing street and sidewalk improvements and transferring that into property tax as opposed to reducing allocations to the two entities. You want to take your 4% from there?
Well, it seems to me that if we do any shift, I'm focused on budget. And if
Yeah,
we do
I
any
am.
shifting between the street and sidewalk and the property tax, all it is moving the money.
Yes, that's
I
true.
mean,
We're moving
the
money.
city will still have the expense, so
Well, no, you
moving-
just wouldn't do as much street and sidewalk improvement.
and we're doing that with other cuts to the
Well,
budget.
that's true.
Outside
That's
of the quarter-cent sales tax, so.
But you have to balance the revenue that these entities bring in, so.
I think
It's a
the question
catch-22.
To me is that with both entities, if we're talking their reductions and the negative impact of this loss of $90,000, it's a much higher negative impact on these two organizations than it is a potential $5 savings on a $100,000 house to a property owner. To me, there's quite disparities in terms of that because we're spreading that property shift over the entire city, not just these two organizations.
When I had the opportunity to visit with Mr. Hollowell and Mr. Remar, I posed a question near the end of my visit. I was hoping that you'd take a chance to give me some feedback on my question, and I don't need to place you on the spot, but my question was, okay, so if we don't look to about $90,000 coming to the city side of things for 2019, where should we look? Now, Jade made a comment earlier. I agree wholeheartedly. We need to look at where 2/3 of our budget goes and what we might be able to do there. But, where should we look? I don't profess just because I sit up here to have the answers to that question. And $5 out of my pocket, I have no problem. But it's not $5; it's $90,000 in terms of the city budget. And I'm open to a compromise, call it that or whatever. I'm not sure that Dave had a particular proposal. I'd certainly be open to that.
But yeah.
I can certainly make another motion just to formally know where that stands. And I think I will, just to find out where those things stand. My motion is that we set the allocation to be 47 streets, 19% prop tax reduction, 30% Cosmosphere, and 4% Stratica.
So is that still the same as
That's the same. I was just
what you proposed 2 weeks ago?
I think just to get a vote and know where we stand for sure.
Yeah, that's the same.
If there's a second, that is.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I don't know how to do this parliamentary procedure speaking, but I would like to see the Salt Museum stay at the 5%. I don't know, Steve, if that you can work that in your motion. We'd have to
amend the motion that Steve made.
Okay, so with that being said, then I'd like to amend the motion, leaving the Salt Museum at 5% piece.
You have to vote on the motion, don't you, before you can
Not if
amend
it's
it?
second, not second.
Let me
you have to have a
let me
second.
simplify it
Please.
for you.
Yeah,
a little bit.
parliamentarian. All right, good.
if you want to propose that he make a different motion and a specific percentage, just say so, and we'll see if you want to make that motion.
Okay.
What's your proposal, Dave?
Well, again, suggesting that we leave the Salt Museum at the 5%, and then the Cosmosphere at the 30, and then I don't know.
That'd be 3.
So then what? The other would go to, I guess, property tax seems to be what we were leaning towards with our original intent. Helping with the math.
So it'd be 47, 18, 30, and 5. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. Give me a
Okay.
That adds up.
It doesn't
Okay.
get us to the 100, yeah. 30, yes. Steve?
5, 30, 47, and 18.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, yes.
So you're suggesting I withdraw and make a new motion?
Well, you didn't have a second for your motion anyway.
It died, for lack of a second. Okay. I'd make that motion then, 47, 18, 30, and 5. For streets, property tax, Cosmosphere, and Stratica.
I'll second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any discussion from council? Anyone in the audience that has any thoughts on the motion for discussion purposes? Yes, sir.
My name is Eric Steinley. I'm a resident of Hutchinson, and I'm chairman of the Cosmosphere. I respect what you all are trying to get accomplished. I would not want to be in your shoes. I think the vice mayor made a very good point about not having any sacred cows. My words, not yours. And I
thank you, because that was the word I had in mind, but didn't want to use that term.
And I understand that. I think you also have to fight against what I think is the natural tendency of someone living in a community to take for granted what you have. And I think you are, I mean, when we talk about $5, and I recognize for the budget, it's a big number. When we talk about $5 on a $100,000 home for property tax reduction, and the proposal that you're making is to impact whether people are going to have a job. Because, I mean, our options at the Cosmosphere with less money is reduce programs or reduce people. Mm-hmm. As Jade points out, the biggest part of your budget is people. The biggest part of our budget is people. So when I ask you to fight against the natural tendency to take for granted what we have here. The Cosmosphere and Stratica. They are unlike anything else in the world. And while I respect what you do, I think you have to remember that you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. We are here, we are revenue generators for this community. And when you make it harder for us to generate revenue long term, I think that's a negative impact on the community. So I just ask you to take those thoughts into consideration before the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, ma'am.
Nan Hover, as a taxpayer, I would encourage you to leave it the same. You can't go to Starbucks for $5. You know, I don't think anyone is going to complain. That tax relief of $5 is not worth it. I agree with Eric. I think I would rather see you leave it the same. $5 is nothing. It's nothing. It's not Starbucks. It's not McDonald's. It's not anything. I think the quality of life here is more important than $5 to our personal property taxes.
Okay. Others in the audience? All right, Linda, would you reread the motion, please?
Go back to it.
All right.
Essentially, it's the split would be 47%, 18%, 30%, and 5%.
Would you like to call roll? Or?
Yeah, I'm just studying here. All right, if there's no further discussion, let's call roll on the motion.
Okay, let's see. We will go Soldner,
I'm going to say no.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes?
Dave Line.
No?
We'll cause a strike.
I feel like Congress and the healthcare debate right now.
Yeah.
We can't get anywhere on this.
Not that bad.
Jade, you could vote and.
I
break
could.
it. No,
I could vote. I
you
just,
abstain.
I feel like it might be an ethical conflict of interest.
I'm kidding. in a
We'll
way.
let you turn in your resignation.
Okay, so.
I would ask my fellow council members, Solner and Daveline, would you be open to any sort of a reduction? Shifting.
Change in
Shift, yeah.
allocation. Actually, right now, no. So
To me, I think
we're
we
dead
need
in
to,
the water.
to me, I think we need to send a united message to the voters. And I think what we're discussing here is all certainly in the democracy of an issue. But I think we've created doubt, and I think that is the wrong message to the public. And with that, for those reasons, I stand on my vote.
I don't know. One of the things that crossed my mind is the jobs piece, and of course, jobs are very important. But I also point to John was able to carve out a nice niche out of our budget deficit without the expense of but one job, and I think that was mostly due to retirement. Jobs sometimes seems like the easy answer. If you do this, then this will happen. Does it have to be jobs? I guess is what I'm alluding to the organizations. That brought that forth. Could it not be the programming we discussed and various things like that?
But the programming is what brings the people to the community, to the attraction, which generates the sales tax, the revenue from other resources. So it's a catch-22.
I get it, and again, I don't want people to think that I'm not a proponent of the two or the organizations or anything like that. I just think in this current economic state that we're in, we have to kind of reevaluate what the city's core functions are. Quality of life being way up there in my book. I ride the trails, I do all these things, but I also, being a business owner, know sometimes I gotta shift my focus, things, and look at different things like that. I don't know. That's what I'm struggling with, John.
I would just make a comment on the, the cuts that we referred to that we've made on our budget. Unfortunately, a lot of those cuts are really just kind of kicking the can down the road. You looked at, we've cut a lot of equipment, and it's not that those pieces of equipment aren't going to be needed at some point in time. There's some other real cuts in there that will be ongoing, but the percentage difference you're talking about, I think it's been said, is really not going to move the needle in our efforts enough to really have an impact. I mean, if you revisited this whole thing and it all went to streets, that moves the needle, or it all goes to property tax, that moves the needle. The 3%, and I think it's been said, it doesn't really move the needle for us. Maybe it's more of a symbolic cut than anything.
Well, I'll say I don't see it as symbolic. I'll disagree with you, Mr. Manager. Again, 90,000 would be 90,000 out of whatever we're going to need to deal with next year. I hope you're mistaken. In terms of the quarter-cent sales tax itself.
I do too.
I certainly support that. This issue is not pro or con the sales tax. I voted for it, and I would continue to support it and champion it as we move to the election in November.
But we've got to bring some resolution this morning, I presume, to
yes.
These allocations.
Yeah.
We've tried 2 attempts. Would anybody want to reconsider the initial allocation?
I will. This was not meant to be a grandstand or meant to be whatever. I stand by my opening comments about we've got to take a look, and we're going. I will bet money on it. We're going to have much more difficult conversations next year. Much more difficult. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to be talking about staffing issues.
Yes, we are.
No question.
And I realize that most of what we're doing this year is kicking the can down the road. Jade has made that comment previously. Mm-hmm. This one might have been the easy conversation comparatively to issues that we're going to have to look at. So, yes, I'm willing. We need to make a decision. I was hoping it was not worth enough to you to hold the thing off, but I guess I'll. If we were playing chicken, I'm going to give. But it's not worth putting it off to me, and leaving that as a question mark, and leaving it difficult for those that will be going into the community, the chamber, the Cosmosphere, Stratica, and promote the sales tax issue without being able to talk about what the percentages are and the issue still being up in the air. So anyway, the answer to your question, Mr. Mayor, is yes, I will
Would you
rethink.
make that motion then?
No, you make the motion.
All right. I would move that we would revert back to the original agenda item as the motion with the allocations as previously presented in that ordinance.
And I will second. Again.
All right. Motion and a second.
A comment. I hope I'm not leaving you out to dry, Mr. Inskeep.
No. If I might a moment, same thing. I also was not doing this to self-promote or anything along that lines. Again, I do champion both institutions and so on and so forth. As I came into this meeting, I was talking to my wife yesterday evening, and I said, part of me wants to get into some sort of debate or whatever and be right. Well, it's not about being right. It's about finding what's best for the community. I found myself, as we were negotiating incrementally, that I was getting further away from what was probably for the best for the community. So I also agree with Steve and my other compatriots that it's not worth, that's not the right wording. I will continue to explore other opportunities and other avenues as they present themselves. So there will be interesting conversations that arise, but I won't pursue my own personal agenda or attempt to be right in this situation. Based on where the conversation's been heading, it seems like it makes most sense to just leave it as it is. So with that being said, I'll call the roll or whatever.
All right, other comments? If not, let's call roll.
Soldier?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckett?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. All right, before we go to the next item, while we have the folks from the Cosmosphere and Stratica here, as one elected official, I'm certainly going to present a challenge to all of you, along with the city of Hutchinson as being a participant in this question. It would be terribly interesting to know that the three entities will soon gather and begin to make some plans in terms of how to best educate the elected or the public in terms of the benefits of what they previously have approved on 4 occasions. And I think that is so essential that we come with one voice, one united message, that this is good for Hutchinson. It has been good for all the organizations, and particularly the city, and the benefit to the taxpayers with the property tax reduction. So I encourage all of you to do that, and would look forward to getting a report prior to the election in terms of exactly what your plans are, if I might ask you to do that. And I know Mr. Deardoff would be, has indicated previously that he certainly is available to be part of those discussions. All right.
If I may, Mayor, I'd like to reiterate my challenge to not just those of you present and just the organizations that we were discussing this morning, and I think I'm looking at the cameras, to the citizenry of this city. We need ideas and suggestions and input. Again, sitting up here doesn't make us all intelligent and having all the answers. There will be difficult decisions to be made, and I welcome that from folks that have ideas, opinions, and certainly from folks who have interest and knowledge and skill and experience in dealing with things. So, please.
Thank you. With that, let's take a 10-minute recess if we can.
I think 5 would be.
need to be able to conduct banking activities. So with this, I recommend that you pass the resolution authorizing these individuals as stated to conduct banking business for the city.
This is very routine, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, yeah, it's just whoever signs to pay the bills.
Yeah.
All that said, I'm going to move to approve the resolution designating the authorized officers or employees to conduct business with authorized banking institutions. We want to pay the bills.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8A, consider approval of dispatch contract for 2018.
Good morning, Council. I'm Merrill Dye, the Assistant City Manager. We have before you today the dispatch contract for 2018. I'm just going to summarize real quickly on each of these contracts. For Article 24, the telephone service article was revised to recognize basically that people don't really have landlines anymore. People are using cell phones. So that was just a language change. On Article 27 for wages in 2018, probationary employees will be paid at a classroom rate of pay in advance to a console rate of pay once they have successfully completed classroom training. With successful completion of console training and attaining regular status, the employee will go to the bottom of the regular employee pay range. During the 2018 payroll year, employees with satisfactory performance will be eligible to receive a pay increase of 2.5%, not to exceed the maximum pay rate on their merit review date. And employees who are below the minimum pay rate of the job classification will be brought to the minimum pay rate at the start of the 2018 payroll year. In Article 29, training officer pay, we have always had a training officer pay, or we've had it for many, many years. But this change goes from a 5% of the employee's base wage to a flat rate of $1 per hour added when the employee meets the requirements of the Association of Public Communication Officers. And this is a one-year agreement, January through December of 2018. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right. Any questions from council?
I should know or remember what I don't, Merrill. The wages, what is it changing from? We see what it is or is in the contract for the coming year.
Sorry, I didn't even bring the contract with me.
You mean the current CTO pay?
No, not the CTO, the wages, the Article
the
27. When you're talking about probationary, console rate, et cetera.
I'm not sure what they start them at. Tom, be you
Not the rate per se, but the
percentages.
You're talking about below the step.
Yeah. Classroom rate. I mean, is there currently classroom rate, console rate, and then moves on to the?
Right.
Okay.
They have a training rate.
Mm-hmm.
And for their
It's at the
training
end of the
period, I
contract.
believe it's about 6 months.
6 months.
Before, they can begin to operate successfully on the board. And then they move to a regular rate of pay once they've gone through that training.
Okay. Any further questions of Merrill Dye? Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the 2018 Memorandum of Understanding with the Service Employees International Union, Local 513, Hutchinson, Reno County Emergency Communication Employees, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Daveline?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8B, consider approval of IAFF contract for 2018.
Again, folks, this is the contract with the International Association of Firefighters. To summarize again very briefly, this cleans up the language in overtime in reference to the open pay ranges rather than the prior step plan. Under Article 19, clothing allowance, it's some cleanup language again to reference the uniform apparel allowances that are described in the Appendix C. In Article 29, it's just cleanup again, striking some unnecessary language related to vacation leave and the method in which the department makes vacation picks. In Article 22 on wages, in 2018, union-covered employees will transition to the open pay range with the minimum and maximum pay established for their job classification that is found in Appendix B. New hires will come in at a minimum rate of pay for the job classification, provided that appointment at a higher rate within the pay range may be authorized when qualified persons cannot be recruited at the minimum rate or in recognition of exceptional qualifications of the new hire. New firefighters will be paid an hourly rate that is equivalent to a 56-hour work week during the initial training period, which is a 40-hour work week. Employees promoting to a higher class will receive the greater of minimum pay for the new position or 5% increase over the pre-promotion pay rate. Also, provided it has been a minimum of 6 months from the employee's last merit review date, a prorated merit increase will be applied to the employee's pre-promotion base pay. Employees promoted or demoted will be evaluated and considered for merit increase on the first anniversary following their promotion or demotion date and annually thereafter. Employees below the minimum pay rate for their job class will be brought to the minimum pay rate at the start of the payroll year. In 2018, employees performing at a satisfactory level will be eligible to receive a 3% pay increase, not to exceed the maximum pay rate on their merit review date. This is a one-year contract from January through December of 2018. The appendices was also revised to strike out some language pertaining to the use of the wash rack at Station 1 and an educational program that's no longer available under City Resolution 1048. And also cleanup language pertaining to employees allowed to wash their cars at the fire station. In your cover memo, there were 2 other items listed. That was my error. That was from a cut and paste job that I was quickly trying to put together a cover memo using the dispatch cover memo, so I apologize for that. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
Just a comment that comes to mind, if it would be fitting. I work well with strikeout and insert new language, and that way it's real easy to see what the change is, rather than trying to take the new copy and the old copy kind of thing and compare. Not a criticism, but if it's appropriate, I'd appreciate that to be able to look at because the contract's part of our excuse me, part of our packet. If it could be there with the strikeout language, stricken through the old, and here's the new stuff, either in a color or bold or whatever the case is. Just
we'll look at that definitely.
Okay.
Good clarification.
All right. Council, do we have a motion?
Yes, I will move to approve the 2018 Memorandum of Understanding with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 179. Authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8C, consider approval of SCIU contract for 2018.
Again, just to summarize, the contract with the SEIU for next year. In Article 7, base wages, language is added to the article stating that if it has been a minimum of 6 months from the promoting employee's last merit review date, a prorated merit increase will be applied to the employee's pre-promotion base pay. Employees promoted or demoted will be evaluated and considered for a merit increase on the first anniversary following their promotion or demotion. During the 2018 payroll year, employees with satisfactory performance during the prior year will be eligible to receive a base wage increase of 2.5%, not to exceed the established maximum pay rate on their merit review date. Employees that are at or above the top of their wage scale will be eligible to receive a lump sum bonus equivalent to a 2.5% of their base pay rate, provided they have satisfactory performance. Again, this is a 1-year contract from January through December of 2018. Also, we made a change in the unit description by adding 2 job classifications to the union, and those classes are engineering systems technician and lead fleet mechanic. On Appendix D, we also added kind of a long-standing practice with regard to a taxable tool allowance of $260 annually that we've been paying to mechanics in the central garage. We just incorporated that into the contract. Be happy to answer questions for you.
Again, questions from council? Do we have a motion?
I will move to approve the 2018 Memorandum of Understanding with the Service Employees International Union Local 513 AFL-CIO and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes. All right, next item. Thank you, Merrill.
Item 8D, consider approval of bid for runway 422 crack slurry seal contract.
Good morning, Peter Miller, Hutchinson Airport Manager, and like Angela, I'll make this really quick. It's pretty simple. Runway 422 is one of our crosswind runways at the airport. We've got 3 runways. 422 is the runway that heads up towards OB Road, if anybody's been out there and seen that. The FAA, that runway is not eligible for federal grants. Therefore, it is eligible for KDOT aviation grants. The runway was last paved in 1997, I believe. It was crack sealed again in 2010. And here we are in 2017, and it's time to crack seal, slurry coat, and remark that runway. In January of 2017, we applied for a grant from KDOT Aviation, and we received $315,000 in a 90-10 grant match from KDOT Aviation. In 2016, we budgeted about $87,000 for pavement maintenance at the airport. We hired our existing airport consultant, H.W. Lochner, out of Kansas City for design and bid services. We opened the bids 2 weeks ago. Vance Brothers from Kansas City, APAC Kansas, PLM out of St. Louis, and JLT out of Oklahoma were the 4 contractors that bid for it. Vance Brothers was the low bid at $320,879. So staff recommends a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the contract with Vance Brothers for an amount not to exceed $320,879.26 for pavement maintenance associated with runway 422 at the Hutchinson Airport.
And that work would begin when?
That it's actually turning pretty quick.
September 1st.
We're trying to incorporate this project with the existing project that's out there when we have to shut all the runways down anyway. So notice to proceed for the contractor will probably be about August 1st. With substantial completion towards the end of September.
Good.
Oh, okay. It says September 1st. Good.
Did I understand, Peter, that the money is 2016 money that we budgeted? Did I hear you say that?
2017. I guess we asked for it in 2016. It was budgeted as part of my 2017
Okay, good enough.
budget. So
okay. So it wasn't
The money's
carryover
there.
from last year. All right. I think you said, and I think our material, we were awarded a $315,000 KDOT grant.
Yes.
I take it, though, our share is still going to be 10% of the bid. Or do we get to use the 315 and then pay the difference?
No, we don't. We'll get 90% of that 320,000.
Okay.
So ours is going to be. Yeah,
I was hoping, but
Yeah.
didn't think so.
Yeah, not quite.
Okay.
We can get close. But.
It's still pretty close, yeah.
Okay, all right. Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the low bid and authorize the mayor to sign the contract with Advance Brothers, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $320,879.26 for payment maintenance associated with runway 422 at the Hutch Regional Airport.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8E, consider approval of bid for Main Street water line replacement.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jeff Peterson with the Engineering Department, and we're presenting the bid recommendation for the Main Street water main or water line replacement project. This water line project replaces the existing 6-inch water main that's in place along Main Street from just south of 13th Street to just north of 17th Street. In past phases of the Main Street improvement project, we bid the water main along with the improvements in an effort to try to get the water main kind of out of the way so the initial parts of the street project can move a little faster. We elected to bid this portion of the water main project a little earlier so we can get it done and out of the way, and then the first few blocks can proceed a little bit less tenuous or on top of each other with both the street portion and the water portion. So the next portion of the street project is expected to bid toward the end of this year or first of next year, and it's from 5th to 17th, so it's quite a long project. So we were just hoping to get a little bit of a jump start to get some things details out of the way, things that we needed to get done with the water main replacement. Last week we received 3 bids. The low bid of $593,925 was from Nowak Construction. However, this bid was $15,500 over the engineer's estimate, or about 2.6% over the engineer's estimate. This portion of the project is a little bit different complexion than the other ones in that the city's water distribution system crosses at every side street. I mean, all the projects to the north don't always have side streets, like we went by the fairgrounds, or even up north farther from 30th South, there's streets that the water main doesn't cross that. So we do have, this one's a little bit more difficult. So there is some justifications maybe for the costs, since we have to cross Main Street at 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. In addition, on 17th, we have to cross and connect to existing water main in Crescent Avenue. So there's some logistic things that have to be done, and those will be bored under Main Street, so the Main Street can stay in operation during those construction operations.
So it won't be torn up at all?
Well, one side of the street potentially is torn up.
Oh, okay.
There's been some talk with the low bidder that he might bore more of the project, so there's going to be intersections tore up where we have to make the connections, but the main travel through north to south on Main Street would actually probably be open most generally. They might be scooted over a lane or two to allow the equipment to operate, but that's how that's planned to work. So.
Okay, so now is this going to take place during the fair, Jeff?
Well, actually, portions of it could take place during the fair. We do have restrictions on there that everything, I think they have to be down to 16th Avenue before the fair, or nothing 16th North would all have to be, construction operations would have to be south of there, or they'd have to start south of there and move north. I don't know, it's kind of up to the contractor.
Have you worked with them before?
We have
they
worked with them.
Have they worked in Hutchinson?
Yes, they have.
Have
They've
they?
actually did some work on some of the subdivisions in town, and they actually did the raw water and concentrate lines a number of years ago that went underneath, well, on 17th Avenue from the RO plant to the east.
Yeah.
So we have worked with them in past. So, but the completion date for this is November 17th of this year. We're hoping to get the water main work done, kind of cleaned up, so we can get through the winter and then be ready to start in the summer. So people wouldn't experience the construction operations through the whole winter, because this next project's going to get kind of lengthy. So, but with that, even though we are over the engineer's estimate, we do recommend that the project be awarded to Nowak Construction for $593,925. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
Where does the additional $15,000
It actually
from?
comes out of the CIP. Well, it's actually the reserve water line. The water line CIP reserve fund. So
Okay.
it may impact other projects going forward. It depends on how those come in the budget too. So, but there's potentially some impacts in the long term.
Is the area south of 13th, I think you said, not as complicated with the crossings?
No, it's probably similar or to the same. It's just that we thought this is a kind of a critical corridor to get through, because we have the one block of business and then some residential, so they could make quite a bit of progress when the actual street project comes into, and kind of move that project faster down the corridor of Main Street. So.
The total number of bids on this was 3. Is that typical of what you kind of response you get for a project like this?
Not always. I believe for our water main replacement project that we have going on right now, we had 5 bids.
Okay.
APAC was the low bid on that one. Their present workload within the city right now and some others doesn't allow them to meet the timing to get this completed. They had asked about moving the completion date toward March and April of next year, but I didn't really want the whole area
torn up over
the winter. So there's some other constraints there.
Okay, fine. Jeff?
Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the bid and authorize the mayor to sign the contract with Nowak Construction in the amount of $593,925, subject to the compliance with all legal requirements.
All right, motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And let's have roll call, please.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. All right, thank you. Next item.
Item 8F, discussion of 2018 budget.
More fun.
John?
You guys really want to do that today? Just a couple things just to kind of get the conversation going. I handed out a corrected city manager cut list dated July today. The one I sent out, just to clarify, I was showing a reduction of 438. It's actually 358,808. And what happened there, just so you know, is that at one point in time, I mean, we're throwing out ideas and telling Angela to change this, change that. And one of them was raising building permit fees by 10%. That was a $43,000 ad. And as I got through my thinking process, I decided to take that off the table and have that conversation another day. And so I just wanted to clarify that. But essentially, you know, from last study session, again, council expressed concerns with the fund balance depletion, structural imbalance issues, and a desire to have no mill levy increase. And so we again begin to identify some additional reductions that you might want to consider. And so as we stand today, we did improve the fund balance, projected ending fund balance from 218. We also improved upon our imbalance, and I had that on the bottom of that sheet where we're now about $775,000 out of balance, if you will. In other words, expenses over revenues. And you can kind of see on that page where our 217 budget was approved with about a $1.2 million imbalance. And so we made some improvements and I think in all of those areas, with the exception of the mill levy reduction, the budget still does contain the a mill levy increase of just 0.35, which represents about $107,000, and that's still in there. And so I think from today's discussion, I'm at a point where I think we need to begin bringing this to a close. And also in your packet was a copy of the notice of hearing, which we would authorize hopefully today, that would set our public hearing for August the 15th. And when we get to that point, that would set your maximums. And so even though we adopt that today, setting the public hearing, the council still would have an opportunity to reduce those numbers between now and the time we have our public hearing, or during the public hearing for that matter. But if we added additional expense or budget authority to any of those budgets, we then would just have to republish and have another hearing. And that typically hadn't happened. Usually at this point in time, we're getting to the point where we're fairly comfortable with where we're at. So with that, I'll just kind of open it up and see, if you guys have any questions, any thoughts on where we go from here, any comments about the additional cuts that we submitted for the July 18th list.
Well, John, I would say, first of all, I think we all appreciate yours and the staff's deliverance on this. Very, very, we truly appreciate that. I know it's been a difficult task. But in looking comparatively to the July 5th general fund summary to the revised July 14th summary, you've gotten much closer to what I was hoping for, is that 10% level, and you're at 9.8% roughly. So I think you're very, very close there in terms of improving the projected ending balance. Actually increased that by $448,000. So certainly I think you adhered to what our request was. And then secondly, if you look at the comparative trend in terms of revenues and expenditures, you reduce that expenses to revenue by $537,000. So we're at projected expenditures over revenue of $774,000 as opposed to $1.2, $1.3 million. So I think you made some great strides in terms of improving my comfort level in the ending balances itself. Beyond your cuts, I wouldn't have any specifics in terms of whether council has any other thoughts on any additional cuts. I'm satisfied with what you have presented.
I'd second that, those comments. I think relating back to one of Jade's earlier comments, and maybe one of mine as well, got a sense, how much of what you've reduced in this year's budget requests is going to be coming right back to us for consideration again?
Oh, I would say all the
a heck of a lot of it, right?
Most of the CIP stuff.
I'm just kind of glancing down here through, as far as what I call a true cut is I define that as a cut that keeps on giving, which means it's not there next year, and that would be like a position. I'm just trying to look through here. Most of these are going to be reoccurring conversations. We budgeted the, well, I guess there's only a couple in there. The council pay was one of them. A housing inspector job consolidation, cuts to the cultural activities and arts humanities council. That's a true cut because it won't be there next year.
So,
but predominantly their equipment and deferring. But we talk a lot about that, but that's occurred about every year through a budget process, and the department heads out there can attest that there's a lot of equipment that comes and goes, and we revisit that. So we budgeted the salary savings. In years past we've not done that. Last year we did do that. Maybe a couple of years ago we did that. Previous to that we didn't do a lot of that. And that's always one of those things that kind of helps that, you know, that 3.8 ending fund balance, I'd be 100% confident that's going to be well over that at the end of 218, had we not already taken advantage of the salary savings, which I think was, I mean,
$500,000 or more.
$500,000. So that's a lot. You know, my only hope is that I'm not sure what's going to, you know, move it, but that we improve on the revenue side of things that can help, you know, this a little bit. That's really important. But I do like where we got on the expense versus revenue, because that is something that's always kind of bothered me. And when we've had, you know, strong fund balances, you know, it's kind of easy to get away with that. And I think, you know, the message is you try to live within your means, and as we're getting there, maybe that'll be a little bit easier as we start, you know, next year's budget too. So, but.
Well, again, for folks that don't have access to the full document and so on, again, I would reemphasize that since we saw our first budget document back here about 6 weeks ago, that city manager and his staff has cut $3.3 million off of the original proposed budget. So that's approximately 10% of the total operating budget of the city. So to me, those are substantial cuts that were simply needed. We simply needed to address those, and you have.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would point out on the CIP, I was looking at that earlier this morning, and you know, in 17 from a general fund impact, we had about $994,000 worth of CIP projects, and in 218 that's 396. So we cut that area almost 600,000. So that's a big, you know, big jump. And we had, you know, other things that are really a little bit beyond our control. Technically, maybe not, but you know, wage increases. We had agreed to that early on, which I think is a good thing. Investing in our employees, and KP&F, you know, as a 1% increase, that was another couple $100,000 there, just on the retirement for fire and police. Health insurance increases, everybody knows those are going up. We took a hit of a couple $100,000 there, and we even reduced that, and because we're self-funded. The true estimate was about 9% increase in health care, and we budgeted at about 6%. I mean, we feel like our balances in our health and dental fund will help us there. So, and then work comp. That's when we talked about. That's was originally a $215,000 hit, and we reduced that down to $140,000. But still, those are, you know, increases that are pretty substantial. So.
I don't know what the city's attrition rate necessarily looks like, but I would ask that as we progress through the year, we look at people leave, people get asked to leave, people retire, various things like that, that we look at if there's other opportunities for job consolidation. I know oftentimes you have to pay that individual a little more for the additional work, but still one person salary might be less than two for that same output or whatever.
Yeah.
That might be another.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Keep the pencil sharp, because we're going to be back here in a year.
Right. Right.
No, I mean, to affect real savings, that's where it has to come from. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but
you're right.
It's people. So, been there, done that.
Okay, so going forward, calendar-wise.
Well, again, we essentially we need to have our budget approved by the August 15th date. We have to have it certified to the county by, I believe it's like August 25th. And so typically it's that second meeting in August. And in your packet was the notice of hearing that would set our public hearing for the 15th. And we could, and that we've got to publish it. It's got to be in the paper for 10 days, but that gives us plenty of time, gives other people plenty of time to review the budget prior to that hearing. And during that hearing, certainly I'll make a few comments, you know, just kind of an overview of all the things you guys have been working on, and then ask for the council to have the public hearing. People can comment on it, and then ask you to approve it. So
we would intend to have the public hearing and approve it on that date.
Right.
August.
Some years we've had the public hearing and then approved it 2 weeks later, and we can do that if you'd like on the first. Unfortunately, I could not be here. I've got to be out of town that day, and I'd kind of like to be here during the public hearing. But if you want to have that, then we can approve it on the 15th. So.
I think we can do it all in one day.
I think we can. Yeah, I think we've. I mean, you know, I was looking back on the number of meetings, and you know, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7. And these were not 30-minute meetings. These were long meetings. And so you guys really, I appreciate the council's efforts and interest in everything in the budget, from the CIP to the equipment to our utility funds, those kinds of things. So, and I should point out, as I mentioned, the utility funds, you know, a couple quick things, and not to brush over my report to you, but, you know, the animal shelter, we had a lot of questions about, you know, what we might do to reduce our operating costs at the animal shelter. And we had the staff look at some ideas, and I thought they did a nice job in presenting the pros and cons to different things. And as I noted in there, there's not a lot of good things that come out of some of those proposed cuts. You know, one of the things we talked about was hiring a full-time veterinarian and cut down on our contractual veterinarian cost. But at the end of the day, it's not going to save us money. Could we be more efficient? Maybe. Probably some help there, but it wasn't a budget saver. And I think some of the other things they talked about in terms of how we handle animals on intake when we give them shots, and we do all the spay and neuter prior to adoption, creates a lot of problems, I think, for us operationally if we don't do that. So, but I appreciated them, you know, just looking at that. So if anybody's got any questions on that, we can talk about that as well.
I don't have any questions on that, but I do maybe need some clarification again on the spreadsheet for the sewer rate increase options.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And you know, we talked a lot about that going back to our meeting back on, I guess it was May 30th, when we presented the utility funds, and we talked about our proposed increases. And what we have in your budget today is in our water fund increases were, let me look at my notes here. Yeah, the water and sewer rates for 218. The next sewer rates proposed in May, 11.9% for the 218, followed by 6.2, 6.1, 5.8, and 5.7. And you all had some concerns with that. And so we came back, Brian Clinton, with a proposal that would increase it 7% in 218, followed by just slightly over, right around 7% through the year 2022. And so the water rates were basically left at the level we presented back in May at the 5.5% through 2022. So I think the council's concern was that initial upfront, if you remember, I believe it was like 17% in year 18, and then no increase in the next year, and then followed by some smaller ones. And there was a conversation about trying to equalize that out over that period. So,
so on the spreadsheet, are we looking then at option 3 again?
Brian would help me out. What's
Is it the option 3 that you've built
I would
into the
assume
budget?
all options are on the table, though, right?
Right.
Yes,
yeah,
option
option
3
is the one
Right.
that evens out the percentage over a 5-year
Evens
period
out the
around that
percentage.
7% increase.
What does that number at the bottom right hand of negative $501,000 mean?
Right,
What
that's
does that
compared
mean?
to option 2, which was what was presented back in May.
Right.
And so over that 5-year period, there'll be $500,000 less in the utility fund than as compared to option 2.
And what's the total dollars accumulated over those 5 years under option 2?
Under option 2, it's $35 million.
So under option 3, it would then be $34.5 million.
Yes.
That would be
Right.
Accumulated over that period of time.
That's right. And that money would come out of our CIP.
Are you concerned about that decline of that $501,000?
Well,
yeah.
Of course I would prefer to have that. Yes.
But
it does impact. It impacts our ability to do some of our projects. So we just have to postpone, for example, the sanitary sewer lining projects, which is a preventive maintenance project.
Well, I look at the two, and I know that was the suggestion, is to flatten those percentage increases out. But in that 2018 option 2 to option 3, it basically represents about an 80 cents a month difference in terms of the option 3 over option 2, $9.60 a year, option 2 versus option 3. Is that Is that equitable in our mind in relation to losing $501,000 of CIP monies? I know we've been through this before.
No, I'd rather go with option 2, personally.
The residential rate, and I apologize, if I turn my iPad, it still puts the thing sideways. So I'm going to turn my head to get to look at it. But it says residential rate 6 HCF, 600 cubic feet.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of is that the base amount for a residence or
That's the average residential.
That's the average?
Yes.
So most, not all, but most folks would be paying that amount or see that increase or
Yes.
less. Higher users would see, of course,
A little higher, yes.
a higher rate increase.
That's correct.
There was a conversation about this the year prior, and we chose not to exercise that. Can you remind me, I don't know if the cost is the right word, but the cost to the fund for kicking that can 1 year down the road and not doing anything?
Yeah, it was about a $1.5 million loss over that 5-year period.
Okay.
By delaying
it by 1 year.
Delaying it by 1 year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm probably an outlier on this one again, but I'm actually in favor of option 1. Given it the cash flow injection at the front side to allow things to kind of right that ship, so to speak.
I wouldn't be opposed to that option. I would hate to do option 3 and leave $500,000.
Correct. For me, that's not a viable option personally. But I would lean towards myself the option 1 with a little bit of a front end load, but some relief throughout. But then also it creates a positive situation in the fund balance versus either status quo or equal or certainly not a hit, the 500,000. Just throwing out my.
Not with you on that one, Dave. I'd prefer option 2.
Would you?
Yeah.
You prefer option 2?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is a bump the first year, but
You prefer option 2?
yes, which will gain us the entire 35 million. That's, I guess, part of the package.
Is option 2.
Yeah, I'm more with option 2, although I understand the logic on the other, but.
And I assume the group you're leaning that way due to the increase per individual household for that or whatever.
Yeah.
Impact.
Yeah.
It's
An 80 cent per month, yeah.
80 cent per month.
Difference.
But you factor that in over 5 years and it's $500,000.
Yeah, I know.
And that's why I'm leading to
Exactly. To option 2, me too.
with 2 rather
Right,
than 3.
Than 3, yes.
yeah.
Well,
I've
are we voting on that? I mean,
No.
do we have to vote on that
I don't
today?
think
We don't,
this is
do
an
we?
item, an
No.
actionable item.
So,
Well,
I
do
mean,
you-
it
But
will
you do
be
need
direction.
direction.
But you need
Correct.
direction in
Oh.
terms of what option to
Yeah.
build into your
Yeah.
For the budget.
your budget, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I'm with 2.
Yeah. And actually, it would happen officially, I mean, although we're gonna incorporate those revenue numbers in our budget, so and I don't remember what we actually had, what do we have plugged in as it sits today, do you? No, option 3, yeah, so
You
what
have
we
3
might,
build in?
yeah, cause what we do is we basically budget the maximum
Right.
amount,
Right.
the money we have, the revenue plus the fund balance. So we would probably make that change for the publication, which still, the official approval of this would happen down the road when we bring the resolutions to you in September, October, whenever we do that, so. But we would probably want to go into our budget kind of on the right side with that, so.
So
if
by
consi-
consensus, is this
Yeah.
acceptable?
Yeah.
For option 2?
Dave, can you live with it?
I'm not going to
Yes.
fight. Yeah,
Okay.
No, that's-
Yes.
Okay.
Option
3 is
2?
definitely off the board. The other-
Yeah, 3 is
Yeah.
definitely off the board, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
would say go forth.
John, anything else on
I think
on the budget?
that's what I had. I would ask if we're ready to approve the notice of hearing, and basically all we need to do there is, and you've got a copy of that hearing, and what will change on that from today would be just simply the change we just made on the sewer rates. But approval of the notice of hearing that you have, that would include a maximum published mill levy of 44.32, and that's the 0.34 increase. So, and again, we can come down from that between now and that day. If you like, we just wouldn't be able to exceed that.
I'd so move that.
You so moved that motion?
Linda, do you have that?
Catch that.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All right. Please call roll.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayblight?
Yes. All right, that completes the discussion of the budget. Next item, Linda.
Item 9, report of city officials.
All right, Jay, do you have anything this morning?
No, thank you.
All right.
I've reached my allotted amount of statements, so.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Steve?
I've reached my allotted amount of conversation.
I think we all have, nothing.
Ditto. So, John, how about you?
I haven't talked as much as you guys
Yeah,
have. I would just remind you of our joint meeting with the city county that we're going to have at noon today, and that is at I call it the jail. It's a Reno County Correctional Facility.
Oh,
Everybody knows where
okay.
that's
Down
at.
there on
'Cause I think
Seventh?
some of us were thinking it was over here. So,
Yeah, it was.
and did we have that at 11:30?
I
didn't
have
we?
11:30 on here.
I do too.
We'll be late.
Well, they'll have to wait for it.
Yeah,
You'll have to.
because we need to have a quick executive session, and I will say.
How much time do you think we need?
Just say not to exceed to 11:45, and I will notify the county we may be a few minutes late.
I will move to recess into executive session pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exception KSA 75-4319B3 in order to discuss pending issues related to the 2018 contract negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police. The open meeting to resume in the City Council chamber at, I'm sorry, you said 11:45 a.m.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Please call roll.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayblight?
Yes.
And for those of you that stayed, wow.
They're all